All right, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am RJ Stamper, and on behalf of the Florida Atlantic University Libraries, I welcome you to this virtual event to celebrate Pride Month. We have currently 3, maybe 4 outstanding speakers that are joining us. We're waiting on one more speaker who hopefully will join us very soon. But they've come here today to share their stories of pride. This event's being held in partnership with the FAU Center for Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies as a part of the library's Erase Hate initiative. Our speakers have been invited to share their unique stories and experiences with us. Each panelist will have about 10 minutes to speak. If at any time during this presentation you have a question, you can use the Q&A, or if you have an issue about the technology, please feel free to email FAULIBCOMM, that's FAULibComm @fau.edu. Our first speaker with us today is Rebecca Andre. A lifelong social justice activist, Beck has marched against the war in Vietnam while in high school and now serves as the president of the Palm Beach County National Organization for Women, a local chapter of an institution committed to fighting discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. In her story, Beck will discuss bisexuality, mental health, and gender equality in higher education. So Beck, thank you for joining us. Beck, are you there?
How embarrassing. Have we not learned that over 2 years? I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
I have about 7 minutes worth of conversation, and I'm going to mostly read it, but I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation and the introduction. I'm delighted to be on the panel, the other amazing panelists, some of whom I know already, which is great. The pandemic helped this introvert not have to talk too much. It was fun reflecting on my story, and I look forward to everyone else's. I retired as a tech teacher 3 years ago, and I am currently the president of the Palm Beach County Now board, and I'd like to stay in the background usually, supporting tech on the side of whatever we're doing. So, 1 second. First, this is a somewhat non-linear story. Second, I respect an intersectional approach to identity and not acknowledge my able-bodied, white privileged, cisgender status. Thanks to Kimberlé CRENSHAW, I'm going to give a shout out to the African-American legal scholar you would all learn from. Please do check out her podcast, Intersectionality Matters. It's fabulous. Okay, my story. I knew early in my life that I was happy in my own skin, and I was attracted to boys and girls, especially bad, smart, funny boys and girls. For example, in the second grade homeroom, I squeezed between Christine and David and loved them both. When my mother got involved with the feminist movement in the mid-1960s, I was still watching soap operas, pretty oblivious to world issues. But when I was 15, my next love was a senior football player who happened to be Black. I knew if any friends dropped me for dating him, they weren't really my friends. He taught me to drive. To my mother's surprise, she only had to teach me how to drive a stick shift. Jack and I enjoyed each other's company until he joined the Army and was shipped to Korea. My family also believed in education, and I got that bug later. First, though, I pushed the gender envelope by being the first woman on the landscape crew at Muirfield Golf Course, which was being built by Jack Nicklaus in 1974. Finally getting the bug to learn more, I used those skills to get a job at Ohio State in 1978, where I knew the college classes were offered free to staff. Because I didn't see myself in the college curriculum, I was on the 12-year plan. And I mostly adhered to heteronormative expectations and married a man at 22. If only I had married his sister, my best friend. She and I would have been better off. Alas, the marriage to her brother ended because of domestic violence, mostly verbal. I married twice more, each ending not because of sexuality, but other incompatibilities. After that, at about age 36, I told my mother I was looking for a good woman, and she understood. Both of my parents married 4 times. I guess I was trying to keep up. When I found a great woman, I introduced her to everyone in my life, and she moved in way after the second date. Okay, that's an old lesbian joke. I explained to questioning friends and colleagues, and most of them seemed to accept my choice. I read everything about coming out that I could find. There was much evidence that many women come out later in life. Did you read about 95-year-old Maybelle Blair recently? She inspired a league of their own and came out last week. Good for her. My first course in women's studies in 1989, like I said, I was on the 12-year plan, propelled me to keep learning and more quickly. Dropped everything else and just try to go to school. Yes, I finally earned that baccalaureate in business administration and a minor in women's studies. And then I knew I needed to go on to the master's program because I had just begun to learn. My first sister-in-law was the impetus for my master's thesis on the employment needs for women with mental illness after she was diagnosed as bipolar. While working in the master's and PhD programs, my longtime girlfriend gave me a lot of grief for claiming bisexuality. I read everything I could find on the topics of coming out, but I was still very committed to the understanding at that time of bisexuality. I invited Lonnie Kuhumanu, author and co-editor of By Any Other Name, which was one of the first compilations to explore bisexuality from multiple perspectives. I was a TA and I could conduct this outrageous behavior. I asked Lonnie to present in a few OSU classes and to stay with us while she was in town. It was wonderful talking with Lonnie in person, and I knew that I was queer enough. My favorite essay in the book stated, "My sexuality is plaid." At the annual Women's Festival outside Columbus, Ohio, probably the next year, 1993, I offered a workshop. You say you're bi, she says, huh? 40 women showed up for conversation and Q&A. It was very rewarding. My mother's brother, who was married with children, was diagnosed with HIV/AIDS in 1994, and some family members refused to acknowledge him at all. No cards, no visits, no calls. I was appalled, and I jumped on a plane for a one-day visit to him in a VA hospital in North Carolina. We shared some laughs, memories, and his lunchtime tuna sandwich. Back at home, because of my girlfriend's discomfort with my solid stance on bisexuality, and because I found her extroversion exhausting, I found comfort elsewhere, and I'm still in the longest, most wonderful relationship of my life with a wonderful human who happens to be a white cis male and supports everything I do. Closing the circle, my sister's high school age child is leaning into non-binary language and behaviors, and I support them totally. Recently, they created a colorful square for the AIDS memorial quilt for the uncle I hugged goodbye all those many years ago. Thanks for listening.
Awesome, Beck. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know your camera was popping on and off a couple times through that technology. Always the challenge, but thank you so much, Beck.
I apologize. Thank you.
And our next speaker is Clarence, and I know Clarence might have been having some technology issues. So Clarence, are you with us? Able to turn your camera on and speak? Clarence.
Hello.
Hey
Can you
there,
hear
how
me?
are you? I can hear
Seems
you.
frozen. Yes.
Yes, hear you and
All
see
right.
you. Hi.
Okay. Can you see me?
Well, I'm going to
Okay.
introduce you real quick, and then I'll hand the
Yeah, yeah.
camera over to you.
Hi. So
All right.
I am coming.
Clarence is now an associate professor and a director of dance here at FAU. Clarence was once a high school dropout and a math major who only started dancing at 20 years old. He had to relearn how to walk at 26, and yet later he's danced with over 70 dance companies and eventually founded his own place. In his story, Clarence is going to share his fascinating story as a gay Black professional dancer who overcame many obstacles to become who he is today. Clarence, it's all yours.
Thank you for that introduction. I am hoping that my connection here
All right, Clarence, I think we're having some difficulties with our connection. So we're going to go ahead and jump to our third speaker. And Clarence, if you can rejoin us, I would love to have you, but you have frozen. All right, our next speaker is going to be Idalia Maqueda. Idalia is a first-generation college student, got their Master's of Social Work at FAU last year, so recent grad, congratulations, and works as a therapist at an elementary school. Puerto Rican and Mexican and the child of an immigrant, Idalia will talk about the many intersectional identities that have crafted them as a person. In their story, Idalia is going to discuss queer and non-binary representation and safe spaces in the mental health field. Idalia, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, RJ. So I'm going to be reading. Public speaking isn't my thing. So every time I practice, I kind of get the words right and kind of get exactly what I wanted to say portrayed. So I wrote something out. So hi, I'm Idalia Maqueda. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I currently identify as queer, trans, and non-binary. And I say currently because I'm sure as a crowd here is aware that gender and sexuality are kind of this ever-evolving thing. So I'm just covering my bases. So I'm a first-generation college student. I got my master's in social work from FAU, a year ago. Along with my master's, I have a bachelor's in social work, as well as a certificate in child welfare, and a certificate in women, gender, and sexuality studies. I grew up in beautiful Lake Worth and was brought up in a poor working class family with 3 sisters. My parents met at a skating rink as teenagers and got married 9 months later. My father immigrated to the United States from Campeche, Mexico, when he was 15 years old. He began working in construction as a teenager, and that's where he stayed for the past 40 years. My mother was born in the States, here in Lake Worth as well, and she works as a medical secretary where she's worked for 20 some years now. Her mother, my grandmother, immigrated here at 13 from Utuado, Puerto Rico. She worked in a tomato field when she came to the States, and she met my mother's father soon after. She had her first child at 13 and was widowed in her 20s and was left to raise 5 children on her own. I had a very close relationship with my grandmother growing up. Every day after school, I would go over to her house. Every afternoon, it was busy and packed. Neighbors, friends, family, all gathered together to chat, have coffee, and watch the evening news. There were kids running around the yard and playing until the sun would set. When she passed away 4 years ago, her funeral was even more packed. The large room was filled to the back wall with so many familiar faces and with people I had never seen before. The book where people could sign when entering her viewing had names that not even my mother knew or her siblings knew. I remember during this time, so many people telling me stories of all the times my grandmother supported them and helped them through things. Sorry, I just lost my place really quick. So all the times that she fed them and clothed them and housed them and supported them, listened to them, and just generally loved them. She was always someone with very few material things, but so much love and support and joy to give. She had a special way of making you feel like the most important person in the world. And I've always joked that my grandmother was the original social worker of our family. I first went to therapy myself, my second year of college when she passed. Her death was unexpected and sudden, and it broke me at the time. Going to therapy was something I hesitated to do. And I had to go by the CAPS office several times before making an appointment. Every time I built up the courage enough to stop by the office, I would chicken out when I got to the door and I'd walk right past it. Once I finally began therapy, I spent a lot of time talking about my grandma. I remember bragging to my therapist about how she always carried the weight of the world and she never broke. I told her how I'd never seen my grandma cry and how strong I thought that made her. I remember my therapist pausing and looking at me and saying, that must have been exhausting for her. And this shocked me. And all my life, I'd never thought about this. And this was one of the moments that solidified my need to enter the mental health field. It made me think so deeply about my grandmother and how she never had the freedom to be vulnerable with even us. I thought about my mother and how she struggled with the same thing. And now here I was, hardly choking out words in therapy, so fearful of peeling back all my protective layers and letting all my soft parts be seen. I work now as a therapist at an elementary school that I used to attend, 5 minutes down the road from my grandmother's house. I just finished my first year, and I've been so grateful to give back to the community who raised me. I see so many similarities in the children that I treat. I see so many of the same generational patterns that I myself have been working towards breaking. I've felt the hesitancy from caregivers worried about the stigma associated with therapy. I've had so many caregivers ask me to call myself something different to them and their children. They've asked me to call myself a friend, a teacher, a counselor, wincing at the word therapist. I've also had caregivers come to me about concerns about their children's gender and sexuality, coming to me lost and asking for guidance. I most recently had a parent call me in April, telling me that her 4th grade daughter was asking a lot of questions about liking girls. And I reassured this mother, telling her that this was normal, that many kids her age asked similar questions and shared the same curiosity. I'll never forget the sigh of relief that she let out, and it was followed by a, really? I gave her resources and I assured her that I was always open to having more conversations with her. There are additional layers in terms of queer and trans people accessing therapeutic services, the layers of intersectionality creating barrier after barrier. I'm sure most of you are aware of the disproportionate rates of mental health issues and suicide rates within the queer and trans community, not due to any fault of the community, but due to the lack of safety, representation, and access. This summer, I've had the opportunity to run an LGBTQ+ support group for middle and high school age children. I had a group member open up to me our first meeting about all the issues he was having. He spoke about stressors of the outside world and in his personal life. I could see how badly he needed individual services. I asked if he was in therapy, and he reported that he had been, but that the therapist he was with had expressed so many transphobic views during session that he didn't feel comfortable attending anymore. This child broke through all these barriers to finally get to therapy. And when he got there, instead of being greeted with an open space, he was met with another place where he felt unsafe. Representation and inclusivity matter everywhere, and especially in mental health spaces. Part of my passion in entering the field was providing that, and part of my future plans as a social worker is to get others to provide that too. In the same queer support group that I'm running, our topic this week was hope. I got to speak with the youth about the things that they're hopeful for as queer and trans people in the future, and I want to ask the same from all of you here. We're living in such a difficult world, and I'm sure many of us are feeling sad and hopeless in this time. I know I feel worried and scared about our future as queer people and trans people. We all need to take the time to take care of ourselves, especially those of us with marginalized identities who are facing more and more barriers. We often feel the responsibility of fixing the world that has been pit against us, but we owe ourselves grace. We can't put up a fight if we can't even fathom picking ourselves up. The strongest thing that we can do is take care of ourselves and take care of our mental health. And I want to encourage everyone to take the time to take care of themselves today. It can be something big or something small. just something that shows your self-love, care, and gentleness. We owe ourselves the time to sit with the soft parts of ourselves and to peel back our protective layers. So thank you, everyone. I want to thank everyone here who's part of planning this event and facilitating this event, and those who are speaking today and sharing their stories, and everybody who attended. So thank you and happy Pride, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adalia, for really sharing how you became you, and an amazing individual. So that was a powerful story. Thank you so much. We're now going to move into our next scheduled speaker. I'm excited to welcome Daniela Arias. Is an FAU alum and a professor also. She has taught the courses Gender and Climate Change and Sex, Myth, Power, and Pop Culture, and recently published articles about ecofeminism and climate crisis. In her story, Daniela will share her story as a queer female Jewish farmer growing up in Ocala, the ostracization she faced, and the effect FAU courses and programs had on her understanding of the queer experience. Daniela, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, RJ, for that wonderful welcome. So yes, I will be sharing, actually, it's about a year living in Ocala. I am from South Florida, but I did spend a year there as a farmer and wanted to reflect on that experience a bit. So once again, my name is Daniela Arias. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I did graduate from FAU with my master's in women, gender, and sexuality studies. And I will be a first-year PhD student in the comparative studies program at FAU in fall 2022. So let's continue. So I think a part of me always knew I was queer and pansexual. I just didn't always have the words for it. As a child, I idolized the iconic Meg from Hercules and gave my Barbie dolls butch haircuts. However, it wasn't until my teenage years that I began really reflecting on my sexuality. At 17, I was struck by a comment someone had made at a party. When asked what her sexuality was, she responded, "I just like pretty people." That phrase has stuck with me forever. It was within those simple words that I began to construct this idea of just simply liking people, regardless of their gender. Now, pretty can mean many different things depending on our own understandings. However, for my interpretation, I took it to mean I just like people who I feel called to like. Through that moment, I began slowly naming my relationship around queerness and pansexuality. For my story, I will be talking about a specific point in time when I lived in Ocklawaha, Florida, a small town in Ocala. I reflected on this point in time in Ocklawaha for a class I took called Feminist Theory and Praxis. I identified as queer prior to living in Ocklawaha and lived in Vermont, a very queer state, for a few years. Prior to that, I felt very comfortable with my sexuality in Vermont. However, in Ocklawaha, that relationship of comfort with my sexuality began shifting as I took on the role of the outsider. So for this discussion, I will be utilizing the feminist practice of theorizing from lived experiences. Oh, sorry about that. Bell Hooks, a famous author and social activist, reflects on her experience generating theory from lived experience in Theory as Liberatory Practice. Hooks states, when our lived experience of theorizing is fundamentally linked to process of self-recovery, of collective liberation, no gap exists between theory and practice. So this story that I'm sharing seeks to join theory and practice together so that there is, in fact, no gap, as Hooks notes. I will analyze the experience of living in a conservative rural community in Ocklawaha for 1 year as a queer pansexual Jewish low-income female farmer. During this time, I experienced living as an individual on the fringes of society. I've never felt so out of place in my life, and I have traveled to many places, from backpacking through Hawaii to walking through Jerusalem's city streets. Prior to living in Ocklawaha, I had lived in the woods in Vermont, working for the Conservation Corps. I figured after camping and living in the woods for 3 years, I had experienced extreme challenges and discomfort. I was wrong. In Ocklawaha, there were hunting gunshots going off in the distance, dogs locked in cages outdoors, barking constantly, and "Make America Great Again" signs in front lawns. I was the epitome of a stranger in a strange land. I moved to Ocklawaha because I was given an amazing opportunity to run and restore a 28-acre farm and orange orchard. My tie to working with the land is what kept me there for that year. Daily, I was confronted with sexist remarks, scornful looks from neighbors, and 100-degree heat, all of which conspired to make me leave Ocklawaha a year later. Neighbors would often remark, "Why are you wasting your time farming? Why is your hair so short? Do you think you're a boy? You're a woman. Women shouldn't farm." And it was through this ongoing cross-examination of my choices and appearance that I really experienced being the other or the freak. Through this experience, I came to learn about my self-identity. And this story is kind of seeking to pinpoint the exact source of my discomfort in relation to my experience living in Ocklawaha, using feminist theorizing to understand my lived experience. So to begin this journey of combining theory and practice, I want to bring in the term intersectionality. Intersectionality was coined in 1989 by Professor Kimberlé CRENSHAW to describe how race, class, gender, and other individual characteristics intersect with one another and overlap. It's essential to bring intersectionality into my story because multiple interlocking concepts led to my distress while living in Ocklawaha. To begin with, I'm a queer, pansexual Jewish woman. These factors that form my identity were contrasted with the norm in Ocklawaha. In Ocklawaha, the norm is a heterosexual Christian white male. My identity was the inverse of the norm, which contributed to my discomfort when interacting with people in the community. Immediately, I was marked as an outsider for my appearance and belief system. Another element that came into intersectionality was my position as a low-income farmer. While I lived in a predominantly impoverished and rural area, the fact that I worked with the dirt and farmed cast me out as an outsider in this community. As a farmer in Ocklawaha, I witnessed firsthand the challenges farmers face to survive in a capitalist economy that favors cheap food and fast labor. Being a farmer combined with being a queer pansexual Jewish woman placed various meanings on how I was viewed in society. While identifying myself as a queer woman certainly posed a challenge to how I was perceived in society, it's essential to understand that simply being marginalized as a queer woman is different from being marginalized as a queer woman who is also in the low-income bracket. Another factor that contributed to my discomfort was how I was viewed physically in my environment. I had hairy legs and armpit hair and a short, boyish haircut. Essentially, I was perceived as the other or the freak in town. Rosemary THOMPSON speaks about the other and standards of beauty in integrating disability. Thompson states, "Beauty then dictates bodily standards that create not distinction, but utter conformity to a bland look that is at the same time unachievable, so as to leash us to consumer practices that promise to deliver such sameness." This idea of beauty Thompson is referring to is the sculpted, tamed, hairless woman. Thompson points to the critical purpose of beauty ideals, to produce a homogenized sameness, thus meaning that the inverse of this sameness would be the construction of the other. Whenever I went to Winn-Dixie, I would get stared at with disgust by various men and women. For men, I represented a rejection of the desired clean, tame female body. For women, I represented a wild, deviant form of sexuality that they were taught through religious dogma to repress. One time at the checkout station, a female cashier asked me if I wanted to purchase a razor because they were on sale and I needed one. After I refused her offer, she continued to ask, "Why do you have so much hair on your body? It's not normal." I replied in shock, voice shaking, "I just want to have body hair. I like it." Her face remained puzzled. I took my receipt and walked away, heart palpitating, embarrassed, and tired of explaining myself for the millionth time. So let's get into healing and reflection now. Generating feminist theory from lived experience is a radical form of theorizing within the context of academia. Often, academia values objective, removed, and replicable theories. Theories that are dissected and removed from the observer are considered superior. Feminist theorizing, however, challenges this standard for theorizing. Instead, value is placed on situated knowledge or lived experiences as a form of creating impactful theory based on subjectivity. The emotions and experiences are not removed from feminist theorizing when using the lens of lived experiences. And from this, healing can emerge from analyzing our past. Bell Hooks states, this lived experience of critical thinking, of reflection and analysis became a place where I worked at explaining the hurt and making it go away. Fundamentally, I learned from this experience that theory could be a healing place. Hooks locates theory as a space for healing, a space for growth, and a space for learning. I believe theory can be healing because it allows us to put a voice to our experiences. Through this experience, I have been able to voice the discomfort and isolation I felt living for a year in Ocklawaha, and this reflection has been a healing experience for me. It's allowed me to realize that I was not insane for feeling so distraught in my environment. In fact, I was experiencing multiple forms of oppression that made me feel ostracized. Theory can be a healing space, and by bringing in our lived experiences, we can generate meaningful academic theory to understand ourselves and others. Thank you.
Daniela, thank you so much for being here, sharing your experiences and integrating theory into that. I definitely think we can all take something from your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know that Clarence has joined us and hopefully has a stronger connection now. Clarence, are you able to connect?
Let us see. The sound goes in and out, so I am hoping can be heard.
You're off to a good start.
And,
So we'll go
so I
ahead.
don't need a second intro.
Sure, I can refresh everyone.
Okay, yay. All right. So
just as a reminder, Clarence is currently an associate professor and director of dance here at FAU. Clarence was once a high school dropout and a math major who only started dancing at the age of 20 years old. He had to relearn how to walk at 26, but he has continued to dance for over 70 dance companies and founded his own dance company now. Clarence is going to share his story as a gay Black professional dancer who's overcome many of those obstacles and becoming who he is today. So Clarence, thank you.
all right, thank you for that introduction. And I am so sorry I only heard snippets of everyone else's presentation. So I'm hoping I'll get to watch the recording. My pronouns are he, they, and with respect, she, and that might need a little bit of explanation. I present mostly as male, as you can see the beard, and they, as I have, through the period of aging, become more and more comfortable with my feminine and my masculine and neutral non-binary positions, and it fluctuates in and out. But from the earliest time periods, I have always dressed in my sister's and my mother's clothing. The earliest pictures have me always as that, and extremely comfortable. And just recently, I was visiting my sister in Oklahoma with my mother, and we were at a restaurant. We were masked, but even masked, you can see the beard. And the attendant at the restaurant said, "How can I help you three ladies?" And my mother and my sister, thankfully, were comfortable because they've been around me for long enough to know that it was not an insult and that I was indeed quite placed. So I'm very comfortable being referred to as male and female pronouns, as well as the non-binary. I am a high school dropout is a rather dramatic statement considering I'm also an associate professor. Those of us from Black and Brown communities often have been told and faced rejection and the word no, and especially so many of us have not, at least in my generation, I'm in my early 60s, we're told if you did that was it. Your life was going to be, well, low income jobs. And that was sort of what was facing me. To tell you the story, my father was retired Air Force. He is now deceased a year and a half ago. And he retired in the mid 1970s, was considered poverty level, retiring at that poverty level. So at or below poverty. We did not have a lot of money, a lot of financial resources. My father, I spent a year out of school because we kept thinking he was going to quickly get a job. And so we just moved in with my aunt in Baltimore, and we didn't get that. We were not inner city kids. And so because we were not ready for inner city life. Oklahoma. Now I'd heard the musical show that there were Black people in start doing our research. When we got a house and a home.
Clarence, your audio is going in and out very bad. Could you maybe try and turn off your?
Could
you try and turn off your camera, Clarence? Maybe that'll help.
Could I? What?
All right. Unfortunately, it looks like we lost Clarence's connection. He was just getting started on his story, which was really an outstanding story, and I wish he could have been here to share it with all of you today. But maybe next year, or if we do a similar program very soon, we can invite Clarence back for that. So I apologize. Technology makes things kind of difficult. Clarence was calling in from California. As you can see, he was on in his car. So I apologize about that, but we did hear 3 outstanding stories from Beck, Idalia, and Daniela. So I do want to thank all 3 of them for taking the time to be here with us and share their stories online for everyone that is attending. This was really a great way to wrap up Pride Month. So I want to especially thank Jane Caputi and Nicole Morse from the Center for Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies for helping to put together this panel and support the idea of this program. I would also like to thank the members of the FAU Libraries Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee who presented this idea as a program to educate, to tear down stereotypes, and to really give you, the panelists, the opportunity to hear stories and learn from other people. So thank you to everyone that was a part of this program. You will be receiving an email very soon from the FAU Libraries that includes a link to a short survey. So I will ask you to take 3 to 5 minutes, fill out that survey. Your feedback really helps us as we create future programs. Again, thank you to our panelists that were here today. Thank you to the Center for Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies for partnering with us on this. I hope everyone has a great rest of the week and stay safe. And until our next program, please take care and treat everyone with respect and love. Thank you. Have a great day.